and you ask, what is the United States Senate doing to listen to you? The answer, right now, is an empty chamber. Mr. President, our system was based on a profound notion that sovereignty resides with the American people. That every one of us, sometimes people in the Senate behave as if they have no bosses, as if they're autonomous rulers. And Washington is a little bit of a town where it treats the people in Washington, they behave like kings and queens of their own fiefdoms. And yet, Mr. President, every one of us has a whole lot of bosses. In my instance, I've got 26 million bosses back home in Texas, who are the 26 million Texans whom I work to represent, those who supported me and those who didn't. It's my job to represent every one of them, to fight for every one of them. And the most fundamental problem, bigger than Obamacare, is the problem that Washington has stopped listening to the American people. It is quite striking, Mr. President, that in discussions about Obamacare among elected officials, you hear more complaints about, I don't like all the phone calls I'm getting from my constituents than you do about Obamacare. It is apparently an imposition on some members of this body for their constituents to pick up the phone and express their views. It's viewed as somehow illegitimate. How dare they, apparently, standing on those steps and taking the oath of office, invest 100 people with somehow greater wisdom, greater insight, more brain cells. And our constituents, I get that there's a tendency in this town, particularly as time goes on, to view your constituents as an annoyance. Just today, I've heard multiple senators complaining, too many phone calls from my constituents. What a remarkable complaint. What a remarkable complaint. Mr. President, you and I have both worked in the private sector. The private sector, if your boss picks up the phone and calls, I suspect neither you or I sat on our computer playing solitaire when our boss picked up the phone and called. Neither one of us said, boss, I'm too busy. Boss, I don't want to listen to it. You may have some priorities for the business, but not me. I know better than you. None of us did that because in the private sector, there's a quick and immediate response. You tell your boss in the private sector, hey, boss, my time's too important for you. I don't care about your priorities. I'm not going to listen to you. And I suspect that will be your last day at that place of employment. Why is Washington broken? Because you've got 100 people, a significant number of whom, on a daily basis, tell their boss, tell their constituents, I'm too busy for you. Don't even bother to call my office because it just, it ties up my staff. It's annoying. I know better than you do. I know the priorities better than you do. What a broken system, Mr. President. What a broken system. We work for the people. And why are the people unhappy with Washington? Why are they disgusted with Washington? Because Washington isn't listening to them. There's a game instead that's focused on maintaining the status quo. Staying in office, that's what's important because, Mr. President, it is apparently very, very important to be invited to all the right cocktail parties in town. Now, I'll confess I don't go to a whole lot of cocktail parties in town. I'm pretty sure you don't either. But there are members of this body for whom that is really, really important. At the end of the day, we don't work for those holding cocktail parties in Washington, D.C. We don't work for the intelligentsia in the big cities who write newspaper editorials. We work for the American people. We work for single moms. We work for young people. We work for seniors who are struggling. We work for Hispanics, for African Americans. We work for every American who believes in the American dream. And this body isn't listening to the people. Indeed, the very fact that over 1.6 million Americans have signed a petition, have picked up the phone, have been calling offices in this great chamber, is viewed as an inappropriate imposition. Mr. President, what an indictment of this body. That we think it is somehow illegitimate that the American people would ask us not to focus on irrelevant priorities. It's not like the American people are calling saying, you know, focus on some parochial issue. By the way, are the phone calls are not coming from our district saying, Senator, please take more of the American people's tax money and send it back to our district. We'd like some more pork. Those aren't the calls. Those aren't the calls we're getting. The calls are people who are saying, listen, jobs in the economy is my #1 priority. Why isn't it Congress's? Jobs in the economy matter. Why? Because if you're working in a good job, you're providing for your family. Makes it easier for families to stay together. Moms and dads, makes it easier for them to raise their kids, raise them with good values. Makes it easier for them to provide good education for their kids. And when you have one job, it lets you begin to climb the economic ladder to a better job and a better job and a better job. That is the American spirit.